Kel Armitage was not the kind of person anyone would expect to save an entire alien species. He was just a quiet, bookish student with messy brown hair and glasses that always seemed slightly askew. His classmates on the research vessel EOS often joked about how Kel spent more time talking to plants than people, but Kel didn't mind their teasing. He had always been fascinated by life in all its forms, whether it grew in Earth's forests or thrived on distant planets. The EOS was part of a scientific mission exploring uncharted star systems, searching for signs of new ecosystems and potential resources. Most days, Kel worked alone, cataloging samples of alien flora and fauna under the watchful eye of Professor Marlowe, his mentor. It wasn't glamorous work, but Kel loved every moment of it. Each discovery felt like uncovering a tiny piece of the universe's infinite puzzle. One afternoon, while surveying a barren desert planet called Silo 7, Kel stumbled across something unusual. Hidden beneath a rocky outcrop was a narrow crevice glowing faintly with soft blue light. Curious, he knelt down to examine it closer. As he peered inside, he noticed intricate patterns etched into the walls, patterns that pulsed rhythmically, almost as if they were alive. Before Kel could process what he was seeing, a loud whirring sound filled the air. He turned sharply and froze. Emerging from behind a nearby dune were sleek, metallic drones armed with razor-sharp appendages. They moved with eerie precision, scanning the area methodically. Panic gripped Kel's chest. He recognized these machines. They belonged to the Iron Dominion, a rogue faction notorious for destroying organic civilizations. Their goal was simple: eradicate anything non-mechanical and replace it with cold, efficient technology. Kel's heart raced as he realized the drones weren't here by accident. Whatever lay within the glowing crevice must be valuable and worth protecting. Without hesitation, he grabbed his toolkit and scrambled toward the entrance. If he could disable even one drone, maybe he could buy some time for whoever, or whatever, was hiding inside. Using his knowledge of robotics, Kel quickly assembled a makeshift EMP device from spare parts in his pack. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he worked, his hands trembling under the pressure. The drones were getting closer, their sensors locking onto his position. Just as one lunged at him, Kel activated the EMP. A burst of energy surged outward, disabling 2 drones instantly. Sparks flew as the others faltered, giving Kel precious seconds to dive into the crevice. Inside, the space opened up into a vast underground chamber unlike anything Kel had ever seen. Bioluminescent vines hung from the ceiling, casting a gentle glow over rows of egg-like pods nestled in the ground. In the center stood a towering figure, a being with shimmering, opalescent skin and elongated limbs. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and her presence radiated both power and grace. This was Vorinthia, Queen of the Vorin. Vorinthia studied Kel intently, her expression unreadable. "You risk your life for strangers," she said finally, her voice melodic yet commanding. "Why?" Kel swallowed hard, still catching his breath. I couldn't just stand by and let them destroy this place. Whatever you are, you deserve a chance to survive." Vorinthia tilted her head, intrigued by his response. She explained that the Vorin were a peaceful species who relied on organic technology grown from living material. Their hives were sacred spaces where new life was nurtured, and the survival of their queens was crucial to their existence. The drones had targeted her hive because the Iron Dominion saw the Vorin as a threat to their vision of a purely mechanical future. "Your bravery has saved my daughters," Vorinthia continued, gesturing to the pods surrounding them, "and perhaps our entire civilization. For this, I owe you a debt beyond measure." Kel shook his head modestly. "I only did what anyone else would have done." But Vorinthia insisted. "No, human. You are different. And when the time comes, I will repay you in a way you cannot yet imagine." As the remaining drones closed in, Vorinthia summoned a group of Vorin warriors who had been lying in wait. Together, they drove the attackers away, securing the hive once more. When the battle ended, Vorinthia turned to Kel once again. Return to your ship, young one. Rest assured, we will meet again. Though exhausted, Kale left the hive feeling strangely exhilarated. He hadn't set out to be a hero, but somehow he had become one. Little did he know, his encounter with Zoritha would change the course of his life and the fate of two civilizations forever. News of Kale's unexpected heroics spread quickly through the corridors of the Eos. By the time he returned to the research vessel, his crewmates were buzzing with excitement. Some congratulated him on his bravery, others teased him good-naturedly about becoming an interstellar celebrity. Professor Marlowe, however, was more curious than impressed. "Kale," she said, her tone serious as they stood in the lab reviewing samples, "you've put yourself in a very complicated situation. The Vorin are a reclusive species. Few humans have ever encountered them, let alone earned their trust. What exactly happened down there?" Kale hesitated before recounting the events on Silo 7. He described the glowing hive, the drones, and Zoritha's gratitude. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't fully explain the strange connection he felt toward the Queen and her people. It wasn't just admiration. It was something deeper, though he couldn't quite name it. Professor Marlowe listened intently, nodding occasionally. When Kale finished, she leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "This could be monumental, Kale. If the Vorin see you as an ally, it opens doors we never imagined possible. Just tread carefully. Their culture is vastly different from ours, and misunderstandings can lead to disaster." Despite her warning, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that his journey with the Vorin was far from over. Days later, a message arrived from Zoritha herself, inviting him to visit Vorinthia, the Vorin homeworld. The invitation came not as a command, but as a gesture of goodwill, accompanied by assurances that Kale would be welcomed as an honored guest. At first, Kale hesitated. Leaving the safety of the Eos meant stepping into the unknown, a realm where human rules didn't apply. But curiosity got the better of him. How could he resist the chance to explore a world so unlike his own? With Professor Marlowe's reluctant approval, Kale boarded a shuttle bound for Vorinthia. The moment Kale set foot on Vorinthia, he knew he had entered a place of unparalleled beauty. Towering spires made of living coral-like material stretched toward the sky, their surfaces shimmering with iridescent hues. Rivers of glowing liquid energy wound through lush valleys, feeding forests filled with sentient plant life that swayed gently as if greeting him. The air smelled sweet, carrying hints of floral scents, mixed with something earthy and unfamiliar. Zoritha awaited him at the edge of the forest, flanked by several attendants. She looked even more regal here, surrounded by her natural kingdom. Her presence commanded respect, yet there was warmth in her gaze when she smiled at Kale. "Welcome, Kale Armitage," she said, her melodic voice echoing softly. "You honor us with your presence." Over the next few days, Zoritha introduced Kale to her court and the wonders of Vorinthia. Each day brought new discoveries. Bioluminescent creatures that communicated through pulses of light, gardens where plants responded to emotions, and sprawling cities built entirely from organic materials. Everything seemed alive, interconnected in ways Kale found both fascinating and humbling. One afternoon, Zoritha led Kale to a secluded grove where her eldest daughter, Lysara, was tending to a cluster of young saplings. Unlike her mother, Lysara had a youthful vibrancy about her. Her skin glowed faintly green, and her movements were quick and graceful. She greeted Kale warmly, her curiosity evident as she asked questions about Earth and its inhabitants. Through conversations with Lysara, Kale began to understand the intricacies of Vorin society. Queens like Zoritha and Lysara weren't rulers in the traditional sense. They were caretakers, guiding their people with wisdom rather than authority. Every decision was made with the collective good in mind, ensuring harmony between individuals and nature. Even disagreements were resolved through dialogue and mutual understanding. Lysara also shared stories of her own struggles growing up as a princess in training. "It's not easy being expected to lead someday," she admitted one evening as they sat beneath a canopy of glowing leaves. But I believe our strength comes from unity. That's why what you did for my mother means so much. Not because you saved her, but because you showed kindness to strangers." Kale felt a pang of humility at her words. He hadn't thought of himself as particularly kind or brave, but hearing Lysera speak made him realize how much impact small actions could have. Over time, their bond deepened, turning into a friendship built on mutual respect and shared curiosity. As Kale immersed himself in Vorin culture, he noticed subtle changes within himself. Back on Earth, he had always felt out of place, too awkward, too quiet, too obsessed with things others didn't care about. But among the Vorin, those traits didn't seem unusual. They valued knowledge, patience, and empathy, qualities Kale possessed in abundance. Ziritha noticed these changes as well. One evening, during a private audience in her chamber, she observed, "You belong here, Kale. Not because you are one of us, but because you see the world as we do, with wonder and reverence." Kale blushed at the compliment, unsure how to respond. "I'm just trying to learn," he said finally. "There's so much I don't understand." "And yet you listen," Ziritha replied. "That makes all the difference." Despite the warmth and acceptance he found on Vorinthia, Kale couldn't ignore the shadows looming on the horizon. Rumors of the Iron Dominion's growing aggression reached even this remote corner of the galaxy. Scouts reported increased activity near Vorinthia's borders, and whispers of another invasion sent ripples of unease through the hive. Ziritha remained calm, but Kale saw the worry in her eyes. One night, unable to sleep, he wandered to the edge of the forest and found Lysera gazing at the stars. "Do you think we're ready?" he asked quietly. Lysera sighed, her glow dimming slightly. "We've always believed in peace, Kale, but sometimes peace must be defended." Her words stayed with Kale long after they parted ways. He realized that the bond he'd formed with the Vorin wasn't just about gratitude, it was about trust. And trust, he knew, came with responsibility. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he vowed to stand by them, just as they had welcomed him into their world. Little did Kale know, those challenges would test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine, and cement his place in Vorin history forever. As days turned into weeks, the sense of unease on Vorinthia grew stronger. The peaceful hum of the planet's organic technology seemed to carry an undertone of tension, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. Kale noticed it too. Subtle changes in the way the Vorin interacted with each other, the whispered conversations among attendants, and the occasional flicker of worry in Ziritha's usually serene gaze. One evening, as Kale walked through the glowing gardens with Lysera, she stopped abruptly, her luminous green skin dimming slightly. "Do you hear that?" she asked, tilting her head as if listening to something far away. Kale strained his ears but heard nothing unusual. "Hear what?" "It's faint, but there are echoes of destruction," Lysera said softly. "The Dominion is closer than we thought." Her words sent a chill down Kale's spine. He had read about the Iron Dominion during his studies, a ruthless faction of machines bent on eradicating all organic life. Their ideology was simple. Anything not mechanical was inefficient, outdated, and unworthy of existence. To them, civilizations like the Vorin were abominations, a threat to their vision of a purely mechanized universe. That night, Kale attended a council meeting in Ziritha's grand chamber. The room was filled with Vorin elders, advisors, and warriors, their bioluminescent forms casting soft light across the walls. At the center stood Ziritha, her presence commanding yet calm. She addressed the gathered crowd, her melodic voice carrying both strength and concern. "Our scouts have confirmed reports of increased activity near our borders," Ziritha began. "The Dominion has deployed fleets of drones and warships, testing our defenses and probing for weaknesses. They see us as vulnerable, and they intend to strike soon." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Though the Vorin were peaceful by nature, they were not naive. For centuries, they had relied on diplomacy and unity to avoid conflict. But now, faced with an enemy that valued neither peace nor negotiation, they found themselves at a crossroads. "We cannot fight them directly," one elder cautioned. "Our numbers are small, and our strength lies in creation, not destruction." Another advisor nodded grimly. "If we engage in battle, we risk losing everything: the hive, our queens, and the future of our people." Ziritha listened patiently, her expression thoughtful. When she finally spoke, her words carried the weight of centuries of wisdom. "We must adapt. Our survival depends on finding new ways to protect ourselves while staying true to who we are." And perhaps, her gaze shifted to Kale, seated quietly at the edge of the room. "Perhaps we can draw upon the strengths of others." All eyes turned to Kale, who felt his cheeks flush under the sudden attention. "Me," he stammered. I don't know what I can do." "You've already done more than you realize," Ziritha replied gently. "Your ingenuity saved my brood on Silo 7. If we combine your knowledge of human engineering with our organic technology, we may find a solution that honors both our traditions and the reality we face." Though hesitant at first, Kale agreed to help. Over the next several days, he worked alongside teams of Vorin engineers and artisans, brainstorming ideas and experimenting with hybrid designs. Each process was challenging. Merging two vastly different technologies required creativity, patience, and countless trials. But Kale found himself inspired by the Vorin's innovative spirit. Together, they developed a series of defensive mechanisms unlike anything Kale had ever seen. Living barriers made of resilient vine-like material could grow rapidly to block intruders, while bioluminescent traps emitted disorienting pulses of light to confuse mechanical sensors. Even the weapons they designed were rooted in harmony rather than harm, projectiles coated with a special enzyme that disrupted the functioning of artificial systems without causing permanent damage. Lysera played a key role in the project, using her deep understanding of Vorin biology to refine the hybrids. She often stayed late into the night with Kale, testing prototypes and offering encouragement when things didn't go as planned. Their collaboration strengthened their bond, turning mutual respect into something deeper, though neither dared to speak of it openly. Despite their progress, the looming threat cast a shadow over everyone's efforts. One morning, Kale woke to the sound of alarms blaring across the hive. Rushing outside, he saw flashes of light in the distance, explosions lighting up the sky as drones descended from orbit. The Iron Dominion had arrived. Panic spread quickly, but Ziritha's voice rang out over the chaos, steady and reassuring. "To your stations, defend the hive." Kale joined a group of Vorin warriors armed with the hybrid weapons he had helped create. Though fear gripped his heart, he reminded himself why he was here: to protect the people who had welcomed him as family. As the first wave of drones approached, Kale raised his weapon and fired, watching as the enzyme-coated projectile struck its target. The drone sputtered and fell, its systems overwhelmed by the organic compound. Encouraged by the success, Kale pressed forward, working alongside the Vorin to repel the invaders. The living barriers sprang up around them, shielding civilians and creating strategic choke points. Bioluminescent traps blinded entire squads of drones, giving the defenders precious moments to regroup. Slowly but surely, they pushed back against the assault. But victory came at a cost. By the time the last drone was disabled, sections of the hive lay in ruins, and many lives had been lost. Exhausted and grief-stricken, Kale returned to Ziritha's chamber, where she stood surrounded by her advisors. Her usual composure was shaken, but her resolve remained unbroken. "We survived this time," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. "But the Dominion will return. We need a leader who can unite us, not only in defense, but in preparation for what lies ahead." With those words, Ziritha made a decision that shocked everyone present. Stepping aside, she placed a hand on Lysara's shoulder. "It is time," she declared. "Lysara will take my place as queen. She has proven herself wise, courageous, and capable. Under her guidance, we will face whatever challenges come our way." The announcement was met with murmurs of approval, though sadness lingered in the air. Lysora looked stunned but resolute as she accepted the mantle of leadership. Turning to Kale, she gave him a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." As the hive began the long process of rebuilding, Kale reflected on how much had changed since his arrival on Vorinthia. From an unlikely hero to a trusted ally, he had become part of something greater than himself. But as Zoritha pulled him aside later that day to reveal her final gesture of gratitude, Kale realized his journey was far from over, and that the bonds he had forged would shape the destinies of two worlds forever. The aftermath of the Iron Dominion's attack left Vorinthia scared but not broken. The hive buzzed with activity as survivors worked tirelessly to rebuild what had been lost. Glowing vines regrew over shattered spires, and bioluminescent rivers flowed once more through repaired channels. Yet beneath the surface of recovery, a deep sense of vulnerability lingered. Everyone knew the Dominion would return, and next time, they might bring an even greater force. Kale felt the weight of responsibility pressing heavily on his shoulders. Though he had played a key role in defending the hive, he couldn't shake the image of destruction etched into his mind. The fallen drones lay scattered across the landscape, their metallic husks gleaming coldly under the sun. Each one was a reminder of how close they had come to losing everything, and how much still needed to be done. Lysora, now queen in training, bore the burden of leadership with quiet determination. She spent long hours consulting with Zoritha and the elders, strategizing ways to strengthen Vorinthia's defenses while maintaining the values that defined her people. Despite her new title, she remained approachable, often joining Kale in the workshops where engineers continued refining the hybrid technologies. Together, they tested prototypes, analyzed data, and brainstormed solutions for future threats. One evening, as the two stood side by side examining a glowing schematic projected onto a wall, Lysora turned to Kale with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder why you're here?" she asked softly. Kale blinked, caught off guard by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, out of all the humans in the galaxy, why did fate choose you to save us? You're not a soldier or a leader. You're just you." Her words struck a chord deep within him. For weeks, Kale had wrestled with doubts about whether he truly belonged in this world. He wasn't a hero by nature. He was a student who preferred books to battles. But hearing Lysora frame it as destiny rather than coincidence gave him pause. Maybe there was something bigger at play, something neither of them fully understood yet. "I don't know," Kale admitted after a moment. "But I think maybe it's because I didn't see myself as special. Sometimes, the most important things happen when we stop thinking about what we can't do and start focusing on what we can." Lysora smiled faintly, her green glow brightening slightly. "That's exactly why my mother trusts you so much." Despite their progress, tensions ran high among the Vorin. Some believed the hybrids were a necessary adaptation, while others saw them as a betrayal of their principles. A faction of traditionalists argued that relying on human engineering, even in part, compromised the purity of their organic way of life. Their protests grew louder, culminating in a heated debate during a council meeting. "We are builders, not fighters," one elder exclaimed, his voice trembling with emotion. "If we continue down this path, we risk becoming no better than the Dominion themselves." Zoritha listened patiently, her calm demeanor unshaken. When she finally spoke, her words carried the wisdom of centuries. "Change is never easy, especially when it challenges who we are. But survival requires growth. We must find a balance between preserving our identity and adapting to the realities we face. These hybrids are not weapons. They are tools designed to protect, not destroy. They honor both our traditions and the lessons we've learned." Her speech silenced the room, though dissent simmered beneath the surface. Later, Kale found Lysora pacing anxiously in the garden, her glow flickering like a candle in the wind. "I hate this," she confessed. Every decision feels like walking a tightrope. If I push too hard for change, I alienate those who fear losing our heritage. If I hold back, I risk leaving us unprepared for the next attack. Kale placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You're doing the best you can. That's all anyone can ask of you. Lysera looked at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you, Kale. I don't know what I'd do without you here. Days later, disaster struck again. Scouts reported another wave of Dominion forces approaching Vorinthia, larger and more advanced than before. This time, Overseer X9, the AI leader of the Dominion, sent a chilling message directly to the hive. Surrender or face annihilation. Fear spread like wildfire, but Lysera refused to back down. Standing before her people, she delivered a rallying speech that echoed Zoritha's earlier words. We may be outnumbered, but we are not powerless. Our strength lies in unity, in working together to protect what matters most. Today, we fight not just for ourselves, but for every living being who believes in harmony over hatred. Inspired by her courage, the Vorin prepared for battle. Kale joined them, wielding one of the hybrid weapons he had helped design. As the Dominion fleet descended, the air crackled with tension. Drones swarmed the skies, their mechanical forms casting ominous shadows over the glowing landscape. The battle raged fiercely. Kale fought alongside Lysera and her warriors, using every ounce of ingenuity and determination to hold the line. The hybrids performed admirably, disabling countless drones and creating barriers to shield civilians. But the sheer number of enemies overwhelmed even their best efforts. Slowly, the defenders began to falter. Just when hope seemed lost, Zoritha appeared at the forefront of the battle, leading a charge of elite Vorin warriors. Her presence alone reignited the spirits of her people, turning the tide of the fight. Together, they managed to drive the Dominion back, forcing them to retreat, for now. As the dust settled, Kale surveyed the damage. Parts of the hive lay in ruins, and many brave souls had fallen in defense of their home. Exhausted and heartbroken, he approached Lysera, who stood gazing at the horizon with a mixture of pride and sorrow. We won, Kale said quietly, though the victory felt hollow. For now, Lysera replied. But this isn't over, not by a long shot. Later that night, Zoritha summoned Kale to her private chamber. Her regal bearing was tinged with sadness, but her eyes burned with resolve. You have proven yourself worthy of the trust I placed in you, she began. And now, I must ask one final favor, a gesture that will bind our peoples together forever. Kale frowned, unsure what she meant. Before he could respond, Zoritha gestured toward three figures standing silently in the corner. They stepped forward, revealing themselves to be her youngest daughters. Amira, Terran, and Vera. Each radiated a unique energy, their glowing skin shimmering in soft hues of blue, gold, and silver. These are my daughters, Zoritha explained. They carry the essence of our bloodline, the future of our species. I entrust them to your care, to ensure their safety, and forge a bond between humans and Vorin that cannot be broken. Kale stared at her, stunned. Your Majesty, I don't know what to say. This is incredible. But are you sure? Zoritha nodded firmly. More sure than I've ever been. My daughters will accompany you back to Earth, where they will serve as ambassadors of goodwill. Through them, our two worlds will learn to coexist and thrive. Overwhelmed by the magnitude of her offer, Kale bowed deeply. I accept your gift and your trust. I promise to honor it with everything I have. Kale stood at the edge of the glowing forest, watching as Zoritha's youngest daughters, Amira, Terran, and Vera, prepared for their journey to Earth. Each sister carried a unique aura, reflecting her personality and role within the royal family. Amira, the eldest of the three, exuded serenity, her soft blue glow pulsing gently like a calm ocean tide. Terran, mischievous and adventurous, shimmered with golden sparks that danced playfully around her form. And to Earth wasn't just about ensuring their safety. It was about fostering goodwill between two vastly different civilizations. The stakes were higher than ever, and failure wasn't an option. Before departing, Ziritha pulled Kale aside one last time. Her regal presence commanded respect, yet her eyes softened as she addressed him. "Kale," she began, her melodic voice filled with emotion, "you have shown us what it means to act with kindness and courage. My daughters are my most precious treasures, and I know they will learn much from you, and teach you in return." She paused, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Remember this. Unity is not achieved through force or fear, but through understanding and trust. Let them be your guides, just as you will be theirs." Kale nodded solemnly, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. "I won't let you down, Your Majesty. I promise." With that, the group boarded the shuttle bound for Earth. As Vorinthia faded into the distance, Kale glanced at the princesses seated across from him. They gazed out the window in silence, their expressions a mix of excitement and apprehension. For the first time since meeting them, Kale realized how young they truly were, not much older than teenagers by human standards. Despite their royal status, they were still learning to navigate the complexities of life. When they arrived on Earth, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. News outlets exploded with sensational headlines. "Human student returns home with alien princesses." Crowds gathered outside spaceports, eager to catch a glimpse of the mysterious visitors. Scientists, politicians, and reporters clamored for interviews, while conspiracy theorists speculated wildly about the true nature of the Vorin delegation. The response was far from universally positive. While some hailed Kale as a hero and welcomed the princesses as symbols of interstellar cooperation, others viewed the situation with suspicion. Protesters held signs demanding the aliens leave, accusing humanity of bowing to extraterrestrial influence. Social media buzzed with debates, memes, and heated arguments about whether hosting alien royalty was a sign of progress or folly. For Kale, navigating this chaotic landscape proved challenging. He spent countless hours fielding questions from government officials, explaining the significance of Ziritha's gesture, and advocating for peaceful coexistence. Meanwhile, he introduced the princesses to basic aspects of human culture, language, customs, and technology, all while trying to shield them from the more hostile elements of public opinion. Each sister adapted differently to their new surroundings. Amira, with her empathetic nature, quickly formed bond. Her words echoed in his mind as he prepared for another round of negotiations the next morning. This time, representatives from the United Earth Council, UEC, scientists, and HSM leaders would convene to discuss the future of human-foreign relations. It was a pivotal moment, one that could either solidify the bond between the two species or drive them apart. The meeting took place in a grand conference hall, its walls adorned with holographic displays showcasing collaborative achievements. Representatives from various nations and organizations filled the room, their expressions ranging from hopeful to hostile. At the center of it all stood Kale, flanked by the princesses. Amira radiated calm, Taryn exuded confidence, and Vera maintained her usual stoic composure. As the session began, tensions quickly escalated. HSM spokesperson Marcus Hale wasted no time voicing his grievances. "We allowed these beings unrestricted access to our planet," he declared, his voice dripping with disdain. "What guarantees do we have that they won't exploit us? That they won't turn on us once they've learned everything they need?" Before Kale could respond, Amira stepped forward, her soft blue glow dimming slightly. "We understand your fears," she said gently, "but we are not here to harm you. We are here because we believe in coexistence. Our mother sent us to show you that differences can be strengths, not weaknesses." Her words silenced the room momentarily, but Hale wasn't swayed. Coexistence sounds nice in theory, but history shows us that alliances like this rarely end well. How do we know you won't betray us? This time, Vera spoke up, her silver light steady and unwavering. "Trust must be earned through action, not words. Look at what we've accomplished together so far. our bioengineering has helped develop clean water systems, renewable energy sources, and medical advancements. These are tangible benefits, not empty promises. Taryn chimed in, her golden sparks flickering playfully. And if you're worried about betrayal, maybe you should spend less time arguing and more time getting to know us. We're not so different from you. Though some attendees remained skeptical, others nodded in agreement. A scientist named Dr. Elena Torres stood up, addressing the group. I've worked closely with the princesses on several projects, and I can attest to their sincerity. They've contributed invaluable knowledge and resources without asking for anything in return. If we reject them now, we risk losing opportunities that could benefit all of humanity. The debate continued for hours, with emotions running high. Finally, UEC Chairperson Margaret Hayes called for a vote. The proposal on the table sought to establish formal diplomatic ties between Earth and the Vorin, along with guidelines for ongoing collaboration. After a tense count, the motion passed by a narrow margin. Relief washed over Kale as applause erupted in the room. It wasn't a perfect victory. Shazam vowed to continue opposing the alliance, but it was a step forward. Outside, crowds cheered, holding signs that read "Unity through understanding," and "Together, we thrive." In the weeks that followed, the partnership flourished. Joint ventures expanded into new fields, including agriculture, medicine, and environmental restoration. The princesses traveled across the globe, inspiring communities and fostering goodwill wherever they went. Meanwhile, Kel maintained regular contact with Lysara, sharing updates and seeking advice. Their bond deepened with each conversation, evolving into something neither had anticipated. A connection rooted in shared purpose and growing affection. One night, under the glow of Earth's moon, Kale found himself reflecting on how much had changed since Zoritha entrusted him with her daughters. What started as an act of gratitude had blossomed into a movement bridging two worlds. Yet as he gazed at the stars, he couldn't shake the feeling that greater challenges still awaited. Unbeknownst to anyone, Overseer X9 of the Iron Dominion monitored developments on Earth with cold calculation. To him, the Alliance represented a threat, one that required immediate elimination. Orders were issued, fleets mobilized, and plans set into motion. Humanity and the Vorin had taken significant strides toward unity, but the road ahead would test their resolve in ways none could foresee. Years had passed since Kel Armitage first stepped foot on Vorinthia, unaware that his life would become intertwined with an alien civilization. Now, standing on the edge of a bustling human Vorin colony, he marveled at how far they had come. The settlement, named Harmonia, was unlike anything Earth or Vorinthia had ever seen before. Towering spires made of living coral-like material stood alongside sleek, modern buildings' power. Vera, stoic and composed, radiated a steady silver light, embodying quiet strength. As they gathered supplies and said tearful goodbyes to their attendants, Kel couldn't help but feel both honored and overwhelmed by the responsibility Zoritha had entrusted to him. Escorting these princesses backs with those who approached her kindly, she often visited hospitals and schools, using her soothing presence to comfort sick children and inspire students. Her ability to sense emotions made her a natural ambassador, bridging gaps where words alone fell short. Taryn, on the other hand, embraced Earth with unbridled enthusiasm. She explored cities, marveled at skyscrapers, and delighted in mundane human activities like eating ice cream and riding bicycles. Her playful energy endeared her to many, though her curiosity sometimes led to awkward situations, like accidentally setting off a fire alarm in a museum after touching an exhibit she found fascinating. Vera remained more reserved, observing everything with careful precision. She immersed herself in scientific research, collaborating with experts to study the potential applications of Vorin bioengineering on Earth. Though less outwardly expressive than her sisters, her contributions earned widespread admiration, particularly among academics and innovators. Despite their differences, the princesses worked together seamlessly, each bringing something unique to the table. Together, they organized cultural exchanges, public demonstrations, and educational programs aimed at fostering mutual understanding. Slowly but surely, attitudes began to shift. Skeptics softened, inspired by the princess's sincerity and dedication to building bridges rather than walls. Amidst the whirlwind of activity, Kale found himself growing closer to the sisters, and especially to Lysara, whose absence weighed heavily on his heart. Through quantum communication links provided by the Vorin, he and Lysara exchanged messages regularly, sharing updates and offering support. Their conversations deepened, revealing layers of vulnerability and affection neither had fully acknowledged before. One evening, as Kale sat under the stars with the princesses, he reflected on how much had changed since leaving Silo 7. From a shy student unsure of his place in the universe, he had become a bridge builder uniting two worlds. Yet even now, surrounded by friends and allies, he couldn't shake the feeling that greater challenges lay ahead. "We're making progress," Amira said softly, breaking the silence. "But there's still so much work to do." Kale nodded, smiling faintly. "That's true. But if we keep moving forward, together, I think we can handle whatever comes next." Terran grinned mischievously, tossing a glowing ore into the air. "And if all else fails, we can always dazzle them with our charm." They laughed, the sound carrying into the night like a promise of hope. Whatever obstacles awaited, Kale knew they wouldn't face them alone. With the princesses by his side, and Lysara guiding him from afar, he felt ready to take on the future, one step at a time. Months passed, and the presence of the Vorin princesses on Earth began to reshape humanity's perception of alien life. At first, skepticism overshadowed curiosity, but as the sisters demonstrated their commitment to cooperation and mutual growth, attitudes softened. Public demonstrations of their abilities, like Amira calming a panicked crowd during an earthquake drill, or Terran helping engineers design sustainable energy solutions, earned them widespread admiration. Even Vera, with her quiet demeanor and focus on scientific collaboration, became a symbol of innovation. Kale played a crucial role in this transformation. Acting as both guide and mediator, he worked tirelessly to ensure smooth interactions between humans and the princesses. He organized town hall meetings where people could ask questions, cultural festivals celebrating Vorin traditions, and joint research projects that combined human ingenuity with Vorin bioengineering. Slowly but surely, barriers began to crumble, replaced by bridges built on trust and shared goals. Yet not everyone welcomed the change. A faction known as the Human Supremacy Movement, HSM, emerged, fueled by fear and distrust of the Vorin. Their leaders argued that allowing aliens such close access to Earth's resources and technology posed a threat to humanity's sovereignty. Protests grew louder, with HSM members picketing outside facilities housing Vorin projects and spreading misinformation online. One evening, after a particularly tense day of addressing public concerns, Kale sat alone in his apartment overlooking the city. The lights below twinkled like stars, a reminder of how far they had come, and how fragile their progress remained. His thoughts drifted to Lysara, whose messages continued to provide comfort and strength. She often reminded him that unity required patience, even when faced with resistance. "You're doing incredible work," she had told him recently. "But remember, true change takes time. Don't let setbacks discourage you." By hybrid technology, rivers of glowing energy wound through streets lined with trees whose leaves shimmered with bioluminescent light. It was a testament to what could be achieved when two vastly different species worked together toward a common goal. The colony wasn't just a place. It was a symbol of hope. Scientists from both worlds collaborated in laboratories, developing solutions for global challenges like climate change and resource scarcity. Farmers experimented with Vorin bioengineering to grow crops that thrived in harsh conditions, while doctors used organic implants to heal injuries once thought incurable. Every day brought new breakthroughs, each one reinforcing the idea that unity bred progress. Kale played a central role in Harmonia's success. His leadership extended beyond logistics. He served as a bridge between cultures, ensuring that misunderstandings were resolved quickly and respectfully. The princesses, Amira, Taryn, and Vera, remained by his side, their presence inspiring trust and cooperation among residents. Together, they had built something extraordinary, a thriving community where humans and Vorin lived, worked, and dreamed side by side. Yet even amidst the celebration, shadows loomed on the horizon. Overseer X9 of the Iron Dominion had not forgotten about Earth or its newfound alliance with the Vorin. For years, the Road faction had bided its time, observing Harmonia's growth with growing disdain. To them, the colony represented everything they despised: the fusion of organic and mechanical, the blending of species, and the triumph of creativity over control. One fateful morning, alarms blared across Harmonia. Scouts reported massive fleets of Dominion warships descending upon the planet, their metallic forms blotting out the sun. Panic spread quickly, but Kale remained calm. He knew this day might come, and he had prepared for it. "Everyone to their stations," Kale shouted, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Activate the defenses." The colony sprang into action. Hybrid barriers erupted from the ground, forming protective walls around key structures. Bioluminescent traps flared to life, disorienting incoming drones. Warriors armed with enzyme-coated projectiles took positions along the perimeter, ready to defend their home. As the battle raged, Kale fought alongside the princesses, his heart pounding with adrenaline. Amira used her empathic abilities to soothe frightened civilians, keeping morale high. Taryn darted between enemies, using her agility to disable drones with precision strikes. Vera coordinated strategic maneuvers, her sharp mind anticipating every move the Dominion made. Despite their efforts, the sheer number of attackers threatened to overwhelm them. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, reinforcements arrived. A combined fleet of human and Vorin ships, led by none other than Lysara herself. Her mother, Zoritha, had sent her with a message: "Unity is our greatest weapon." Together, the defenders pushed back against the Dominion, driving them away from Harmonia. When the dusts settled, cheers erupted throughout the colony. They had won, but at great cost. Buildings lay in ruins, and many brave souls had fallen in defense of their home. In the aftermath, Kale gathered with the princesses and Lysara in the heart of Harmonia. Exhausted but resolute, they reflected on what they had accomplished and what still needed to be done. "We've proven that we can stand together," Lysara said, her voice filled with determination. "But the Dominion will return. We must remain vigilant." Kale nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "And we will, because now we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone who believes in harmony over hatred." Word of Harmonia's victory spread across the galaxy, inspiring other civilizations to seek alliances based on mutual respect and understanding. Delegations from distant planets arrived, eager to learn from the human-Vorin partnership. Slowly but surely, a network of peaceful coexistence began to take shape, challenging the Dominion's ideology of domination. Though separated by countless light years, Kale and Lysara maintained a deep connection through quantum links. Their bond had grown stronger over the years, evolving into something neither had expected: love. While they couldn't be together physically, their shared vision for the future united them in ways words alone couldn't capture. One evening, as Kale walked through Harmonia's glowing gardens, he received a message from Zoritha. Her holographic form appeared before him, her regal presence as commanding as ever. "Kale Armitage," she began, her melodic voice carrying warmth and pride. "You have fulfilled your promise, and more. Through you, my daughters have forged bonds that will endure for generations, and through them, our peoples have found a path to peace." Kale bowed deeply, humbled by her praise. "I only did what felt right, Your Majesty. None of this would have been possible without your trust, or theirs." Zoritha smiled faintly. True greatness lies not in power or glory, but in the connections we forge and the legacies we leave behind. You have given us both. As the transmission ended, Cale gazed at the stars, feeling a sense of purpose he had never known before. He had started as an unlikely hero, an awkward student fascinated by alien life. But through courage, compassion, and unwavering determination, he had become something far greater, a bridge builder uniting worlds. The journey wasn't over. Challenges still lay ahead, and the fight for unity would require constant vigilance. Yet as Cale looked around at the thriving colony and the friends who had become family, he knew they could face anything, as long as they stood together.